What product was a very valuable trade item for ancient China? Hint, look at the pictured dress. The answer is silk. And what is silk made out of? It is made out of the cocoons of silkworms. To make the silk, an artisan had to kill the worm and unwind the cocoon in a continuous thread more than 2,000 feet long. This process was kept secret in China for thousands of years. For silk production, silk workers would have acres and acres of mulberry trees like pictured here, because that is what silkworms like to eat. The legend of the discovery of silk goes back to the Yellow Emperor, who reigned from 2697 BC to 2597 BC. He was the father of Chinese civilization. He brought China and wisdom into being. He was named the Yellow Emperor, after the yellow color of the silty Huang or Yellow River, where Chinese agriculture and civilization began. Legend credits the Yellow Emperor with the invention of writing, music, and mathematics. Though there is archaeological evidence that silk was discovered thousands of years earlier, legend credits the Yellow Emperor's wife with the discovery of silk. Empress Letsu was known as the Lady of the Silkworms. It was Letsu in legend who discovered silk. While walking in her garden, she noticed a strange worm gorging on mulberry leaves. For several days she watched it spinning itself a golden net and imagined it was the soul of an ancestor. Then she saw it close itself away and she thought it dead, until the reincarnate moth burst from its cocoon. Toying mystified with its minute broken shroud, the empress mistakenly dropped it into her tea. Idly she picked at the softened fiber, then began to unwind it, with growing astonishment into a long, glistening filament of silk. In time, she became the teacher of silk weaving and of rearing of the mysterious worm, and she was deified, or made a god, at her death. She was placed in the sky in the celestial home of the Scorpio in the constellation known as the Silk House. Today we are going to learn about the trade of silk, focusing on the Silk Roads. The desire for silk in Asia, Africa, and Europe led to the creation of trade routes called the Silk Roads. These trade routes actually included land and sea routes, as you can see on the map on your screen. The land routes are in red and the sea routes are in blue. Much more than silk was exchanged along the way as people from China, India, Arabia, Africa, and the Roman world interacted. These interactions greatly influenced the economic and cultural history of the region. At this point, we are going to read a story about the Silk Road. If you have not already, please get the Silk Road story packet. You will use it to follow along and answer some questions as we go. If you have not gotten the packet, please pause the video now and get one. Let's begin. The journey begins with the caravan. The caravan includes many private merchants, people who profit from buying and selling of goods, as well as Chinese government officials. Members of the caravan travel together to help one another on a long, dangerous journey. Along the way, they will face heat, hunger, thirst, and the ever-present possibility of a bandit or thief. Few members of the original caravan will travel all the way to the Mediterranean. The silk and other goods that they are bringing from China will change hands several times along the way. Beyond making people very wealthy, trade along the Silk Road also contributed to rich cultural exchange. Trade created cultural diffusion, the spreading of culture. Pilgrims and monks traveled along the trade routes to spread their beliefs. Belief systems along the Silk Road included Hinduism, Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, Shinto, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Envoys, or diplomats of the different kingdoms, also traveled along the Silk Road to bring gifts to other rulers. Traders and other travelers gathered at marketplaces. The Kavanarsari, those are special places for travelers to stay and leave their animals, and tea houses, and learned about the cultures of one another. The traders would eat, drink, and socialize together. They would exchange stories about different regions and travel conditions along the Silk Road. Consumers who brought goods from different lands were introduced to the cultures of the people who made those goods. People learned new languages, exchanged fabrics and clothing, and shared art, ideas, music, and food. A nickname for the Silk Road is the Internet of Antiquity. The caravan begins its journey, which will take months, in early spring. The caravan must get beyond the fierce western deserts before the heat of summer arrives. Leaving the city walls of Chang'an behind, it passes through rich farmland and Buddhist temples on a nearby hillside. Please pause the video here to reflect. I would like you to draw a picture or diagram to illustrate your understanding of the cultural diffusion along the Silk Road. We will continue on with Dun Huang. The Buddhist religion came to China from India along the Silk Route, around AD 100. Dun Huang was an oasis, a fertile place in the desert due to the presence of water. The oasis town of Dun Huang, for centuries an important trading and supply center for caravans, soon grew into a great religious center as well. Hundreds of Buddhist cave temples were cut into the soft rock of a nearby cliff. The cave temples contain Buddhist statues. The walls are decorated with bright religious paintings. Some of the merchants go to the cave temples of Dun Huang to pray for a safe journey, while others buy supplies in the town market. Some Chinese officials take charge of a small herd of horses brought from the west by another caravan. They will escort the horses back to the capital. Other officials will continue west to purchase still more of them. The Taklamakan is one of the world's driest deserts. It means if you go in, you won't come out. One of the main languages of Central Asia is Uyghur Turkish. The caravan skirts the northern edge of the desert just south of the snow-capped peaks of Tian Shan Mountains. The route is very rough, passing around sand dunes, across rocky flats, and through tangled willow thickets along dry riverbeds. But the caravan's two-humped or Bactrian camels are strong and hardy. They are used for this difficult journey. Many of the camels and camel drivers that set out from Chang'an turned back at Dun Huang. The merchants hired new ones for this stage of the journey, along with extra animals to carry food and water for crossing the desert. Such changes of men and animals will occur several times along the way from China to Damascus. I would like you to pause again to stop and reflect. List 2 problems faced by Silk Road travelers. List a solution to each problem. Next, we will go to Kashgar. Hot and tired after the trip across the Taklamakan Desert, the men and animals hurry to reach the oasis city of Kashgar. The pastures near the city are dotted with grazing animals and the camps of herding peoples, the Uyghurs in round felt yurts, the Turkomans and the Tibetans in black tents. Kashgar is famous for its fruit. Dates, melons, and grapes are grown in irrigated fields and vineyards. Everyone in the caravan looks forward to fresh food and water. Trade resembled a chain, with each trader and segment of the trade route representing a crucial link in the trade. Goods passed from one trader to another in short segments from China to the Mediterranean. The trading that occurred along each trade route segment was known as peddling trade. The trader would carry his goods, selling them and buying others, while traveling from one market to another. Sometimes traders would exchange their goods for other goods without the use of money. This is called bartering. Some of the Chinese members of the caravan will end their journey at Kashgar. They trade silk for dried dates, raisins, jade, and other local products to bring back to China. Others will continue toward the west, joined by new merchants, guards, and camel drivers with fresh animals from Kashgar. Next, the Pamirs. The Pamirs are a range of high mountains in eastern Afghanistan. Here the route winds through narrow, high-walled valleys beside rushing rivers. The camel drivers call this section of the Silk Road the Trail of Bones, because the many men and animals that have died along the way from falls and from sudden storms in the high, cold mountain passes. This is a photo of the Trail of Bones today. The westbound caravan meets a caravan heading for China with luxury goods from western lands and a herd of fine horses from Fergana. Please pause again here to reflect. List 10 words. It's optional to put them into phrases or sentences to describe the Silk Road trade. Next, we will move to Tashkent and the Kingdom of Fergana. In the central market of Tashkent, the remaining Chinese officials in the caravan trade bolts of silk for horses that they will take back to China. The horses of Fergana are considered by Chinese military leaders to be the strongest and toughest in the world. Tashkent markets the eastern edge of the Persian cultural world. Some private merchants trade Chinese silk, porcelain, and other goods for Persian metalwork, glass, and musical instruments. They too will head back to China from here. Next, we will move to Transoxiana. After making another stop in the city of Samarkand, the caravan enters the wild country east of Oxus, or the Amu Darya River. No government rules this land. The nomads who live here will rob caravans if they get the chance to. Suddenly, the caravan is attacked by a group of Turkoman bandits on horseback. After a fierce fight with swords and bows and arrows, the bandits are driven off, but some members of the caravan have been killed or wounded, and the bandits escape with a few heavily laden camels. Next, we move to Herat. In this thriving Persian city, artisans produce fine metalwork, glassware, carpets, and other goods that can be sold for a high price in China. Herat is also, for the moment, on the eastern edge of the rapidly expanding Islamic world. A newly built mosque looms over the city market. Merchants from the caravan mingle in the market with local merchants and Turkoman nomads, people traveling from place to place for survival with no permanent home, as well as with Arabs from Baghdad and Damascus. Traders from India are here too, selling spices and brightly dyed Indian cloth. Muslim imams, Zoroastrian priests, and Buddhist monks tend to the religious needs of the cosmopolitan city. The caravan will leave its last Bactrian camels in Herat. For the rest of the journey, they will use dromedaries, the one-humped camels of Western Asia. We will pause again here to reflect. Draw 2 pictures. The first picture should illustrate the best possible experience along the Silk Road, and the second picture should illustrate the worst possible experience for a merchant along the Silk Road. Welcome back. Next, we are at Baghdad. Baghdad is the greatest city of the Islamic world and a hub of world trade. Caravans crowd the roads leading to the city. An Arab merchant leads a group of African slaves bringing ivory, gold, and spices from Zanzibar. Ships coming upriver from the port of Basra bring spices and printed cotton cloths from India, pearls from the Persian Gulf, and precious stones from Ceylon or Sri Lanka. Some of these goods soon will be heading east to China. Only a handful of Chinese merchants remained with the caravans, and they will end their journey here. Most of the silk, porcelain, and other products from China have already changed hands several times along the way, increasing in value each time. The last remaining Chinese merchants will sell their goods for a fortune in Baghdad, but then they will face a long, difficult, and dangerous trip home again. That brings us to Damascus. Arab merchants have brought bolts of silk from Baghdad to Damascus. Only the finest silk cloth has traveled this far. It includes intricately patterned brocades, brilliantly colored satins, and thin gauze to make nightgowns for aristocratic ladies. Wealthy Muslim women, heavily veiled, admire bolts of finished silk cloth in a shop. That brings us to Tyre. In the port city of Tyre on the Mediterranean coast of Lebanon, goods are loaded in ships bound for cities farther to the west. Some of the silk that was traded in the market of Damascus will be sent to Byzantium, the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. Romans provided bars of gold and gold coins from their empire. In Byzantium, in the main hall of the splendid palace, a Byzantine nobleman receives a visit from a bishop of the Orthodox Christian Church. Both are dressed in rich garments of silk brocade. The palace women remain in an inner courtyard, out of sight of the men. A visiting prince from Russia, far to the north, awaits his turn to speak to the nobleman. Perhaps he will receive a small present of silk to take back home with him. The garments worn by wealthy people of Byzantium are made of silk cloth brought from China, more than 6,000 miles away. Few people in Byzantium have more than a vague idea of where China is or what its people are like, just as few Chinese know anything about the Eastern Roman Empire. Yet Chinese silk is sold in Byzantium, and Byzantium gold coins circulate the markets of China. The two empires are linked together by trade, thanks to the brave and enterprising merchants of the Silk Road. The video ends here. I would like you to pause one more time to reflect. I would like you to describe the Silk Road. You may list details, include drawings, or use quotes. Please fill out your description in the 6 boxes below. Explain who was involved, what happened and where, why they were traveling across the Silk Road and how they did it, and the significance. Why is the Silk Road so important? Thank you, and you may now move on to your next Unit 1 assignment after finishing this final reflection.